for having me, Bruce.
First question for you. Do you think Minnesota will trade down, thus making Khalil available?
It's certainly possible. I know Minnesota's been talking about shopping that pick, and in my mind, they'd be crazy to pass on Khalil at number 3 just because they needed a left tackle. Khalil's the best left tackle we've seen probably since Joe Thomas. So if they pass on Khalil, it would be a mistake. So in the end, I think they stay at number 3, but you cannot rule it out.
Do you think it would be difficult for him or out of the question to transition from left to right tackle?
A player like Khalil, no, because he has everything you want in a tackle except for he doesn't have the elite strength yet. He's still growing into his frame. He's still growing and maturing physically. So he's a guy who you could plug him in at right tackle, and he's a guy who'll roll with the punches and he'll get better. But all of his experience is on the left side. He's, like I said, he's a Joe Thomas type where he's more athletic than strong. And so could he play right tackle? Yes, but he's more natural on the left side.
Let me stay with Minnesota for a moment. Is there a team, such as a Miami in the case of a quarterback, or someone else in the case of a running back or a wide receiver, namely Richardson or Justin Blackmon, that would want one of those players so much that they would make Minnesota an offer they can't refuse to take one of those 3 players at 3?
Definitely. And I think the key guy there is Trent Richardson. I think Tampa Bay at 5 and St. Louis at 6 are both eyeing Trent Richardson. And if they feel worried that the Cleveland Browns will take him at 4, I would not be shocked at all to see Tampa or St. Louis package picks, trade up to number 3 of the Vikings, and possibly take Trent Richardson there.
Even with what St. Louis did with Washington and stockpiling the picks, you would see them moving up now, moving down as they did, and then moving right back up?
It's certainly possible. If they think Trent Richardson, if they have him that high on their board, they have the ammunition, and honestly, Minnesota, they won't ask for a huge ransom to move back 3 spots, because if they move back 3 spots, chances are they'll still have their choice of Khalil, Blackmon, or Claiborne. One of those 3 guys will still be available for them at 6. So is it a risk to trade back a little bit? Yes, but I don't think Minnesota will ask for the house to make that trade. So it makes it a lot more feasible for a team like the Rams to do that.
So if Minnesota thinks they can get their guy, then they would be open and not demand too much, in other words. That's what you're saying.
Right, exactly. If they
making it workable.
What's that?
Making it workable.
Exactly. They trade back to 6, and if they have similar grades on, say, Khalil, Claiborne, and Blackmon, then you trade back to 6, maybe pick up a 3rd and a 5th, a 2nd and a 4th, something like that, and you can still get one of your guys. If they're not totally in love with Khalil, I could certainly see that happening.
You don't see the Browns trading up from 4, do you?
No, I think the Browns are going to stay pat, and I think that's the right move for them.
Who do you think the Browns covet?
I think that they are looking at 2 players in my mind, and that's Trent Richardson and Maurice Claiborne. And if I'm the Browns, I'm sitting at the 4th pick. All I have to do is rank my top 4 players in this draft, and I'm guaranteed to get one of them. Now, is that Maurice Claiborne and Trent Richardson? I believe so, and I believe the correct pick would be Trent Richardson there at 4.
Why not Blackmon?
Blackmon's not an elite player, in my opinion. He's a nice player. I think he can come in and contribute, but he's not an elite guy. And when you're picking top 5, I want an elite player. And Blackmon, in my opinion, is not even the best receiver in this draft. So if I'm picking top 5, I want an elite player, and Trent Richardson or Maurice Claiborne are both elite players in this draft.
Do you consider Floyd the elite receiver?
That's the curveball. I actually have Kendall Wright as my number 1 receiver. Kendall Wright is the guy who, in my opinion, he's a Greg Jennings, Steve Smith type. He's a guy who can come in, stretch the field, play at all levels, and he's not a slot guy. He can play on the outside. He can play anywhere you want. So on my draft board, I have Kendall Wright, I have right inside the top 10, and then I have Justin Blackmon and Michael Floyd right outside the top 10.
I just had a call before we featured you here on the show, a guy whose work schedule hasn't allowed him to watch me or therefore hear my opinions. And so I told him I would take, if I were the Browns, I would take Richardson at number 4. And at 22, it's feasible that Kendall Wright would be available, and I would take Kendall Wright. Since he hadn't heard my opinions before, it just so happens he agreed. Is Kendall Wright going to be available at 22?
I would say doubtful, but there's definitely a chance. There's Cincinnati at 17, and then also at 21, and then Chicago at 19. I think those 3 spots are likely destination points for a player like Kendall Wright. I was at Baylor's Pro Day a couple weeks ago, or over a month now, and I was standing right next to Lovie Smith as Kendall Wright's running his 40-yard dash times. And I'm watching Lovie Smith, and as he's running his 40 and working out, I just see a big smile come across Lovie Smith's face. And that tells me 19 Chicago could be definitely a likely destination point for Kendall Wright.
How do you rate Stephen Hill? Some mock drafts I see him in the first round and others in the second round.
Stephen Hill he's the Ryan Tannehill of the receiver position. He only has 40-some career catches, very limited production value just because Georgia Tech ran the triple option, didn't throw it a lot. So he's just very, very raw. And so you're dealing with projecting him to what he's going to be. And he's a ridiculous athlete for a 6'4", 210-pound frame. So if you think that he can grow into that type of player where he's going to be a consistent performer for you, then I can see first round. But if you're drafting Stephen Hill, you have to be prepared to put a red shirt on him for his whole rookie season. I mean, he'll be able to contribute, but don't underestimate that jump that he's going to make. And look at Demaryius Thomas, came out of Georgia Tech a couple years ago.
Right.
He hasn't been able to just make that seamless jump because he wasn't asked to run routes at Georgia Tech. He wasn't asked to do a lot of the nuances that it takes in the NFL. So would I be surprised if he goes first round? No, because he has that type of talent. But the team that takes him need to be prepared to put a red shirt on him.
Dane Brugler of CBS is joining us, draft analyst for CBS. Yesterday, Dane, we had Dave South on, the play-by-play voice of the Texas A&M Aggies. Now, naturally, he's prejudiced, but I mean, to listen to him, you'd think that Tannehill is a second coming of Johnny Unitas. What are your thoughts about Tannehill? I mean, I realize he's had limited experience at that position, but according to South, he's an extraordinary athlete. The guy is so smart, he could be a doctor, I guess. In fact, when his playing days are over, whenever that is, he can still, seek a profession as a doctor. He's that smart. He's got that great of grades. And certainly he's got the size and the arm.
No question about it. And I think the biggest misconception with Ryan Tannehill is that he's been skyrocketing up boards. And, as a second or third rounder at the Combine, all of a sudden he's top 10 now. And that's simply not the case. Last summer I was talking to one of my scout buddies, Ron Hoyt, who told me, watch out for this Ryan Tannehill kid. Watch out for what he's going to do this year. And so at that point, I hadn't made a firm evaluation of what I thought. So watching him this year, after 3 games, I was sold. Ryan Tannehill has everything you possibly want physically, from the arm strength to the size, the athleticism, the way he moves in the pocket, his awareness, very, very good. But 19 career starts, and really the biggest concern with me, you didn't see that huge jump in improvement from the beginning of the year to the bowl game. You saw a little bit, but not what you want to see in a top 5 pick. So 19 career starts. He went 10-3 over his first 13, but then just finished 2-4. So that's not what you want to see from a quarterback that you're potentially going to take in the top 5. And to be fair, Tannehill is not all to blame. His targets, crazy amount of drops. The defense couldn't stop anyone. But regardless, he didn't shine in big games. For example, against Texas, it was the final home game. It was the last time Texas and A&M will play in football for, who knows how long. And senior night, Tannehill, 40% completions, 3 interceptions, and a loss. So you didn't see that type of progression that you want to see from a senior, and then a player that you're thinking about taking top 10. So, but with all that said, I really believe that with time and grooming, he can be a consistent pro starter. And, when I say time, it doesn't mean necessarily on the bench. He has a type of mental toughness, so he can come in, start from day one,
right,
roll with the punches. He's that type of...
Grow while he's in the job.
Yeah, he has that mental toughness, which a lot of quarterbacks don't have.
Well, we all know that Miami needs a quarterback. It sounds to me as if you're saying that they can be patient and wait at 8, and he'll be there, and they could take him then. Do you foresee that as a reality?
That's the big question in the first round, especially the top 10, and that will dictate a lot of what happens in the first round. I was at Tannehill's Pro Day, and Miami sent everyone to the Pro Day, head coach, general manager, but so did Seattle. And the Browns had Brad Childress there, quarterbacks coach Whipple. A lot of teams are interested in Tannehill. So I could see him. I could see a team like Seattle trading up to 7. I could see a team, Miami. I think they would definitely take him at 8. If for some reason he falls past 8, I don't think Kansas City at 11 will pass on him. But really, Tannehill is that wild card of the top 10. No one knows where he's going to go, what team is really coveting him, but I don't think there's any way he falls out of the top 10.
Browns have the 37th pick in the second round. There's been some talk that the Browns may consider Whedon. Will he be there, and what is your evaluation of him, and especially considering his age?
I think there's a good chance that he's there, and honestly, I think the Browns will treat that situation similar to the way they treated the Colt McCoy situation, where they won't target him. But if he's available at 37, they might think, okay, well, that's too much value to pass up, and they might pull the trigger, similar with Colt McCoy in the third round 2 years ago. So Brandon Whedon, you have to factor the age in. He'll turn 29 this year, and that's not a big negative to me if he can start right away. But I'm not convinced that it can. I think you cannot underestimate that jump from Oklahoma State's simplistic one-read shotgun offense to the NFL level, where under center, 3-5, 7-step drops, making reads, deciphering information in your drops. That is the unknown with Brandon Whedon. And he's a smart guy. He's mature. He has the arm strength, the size, but he just wasn't asked to make a lot of NFL-style reads at the college level. And I think that's a big learning curve that he's going to have to take on in a few months here. So if I thought he could start from day one, I would take him in the late first, early second round. But I don't think that he can, and that's why I would pass on Whedon in the second round. If
the Browns stay at 4, you are saying the choice will either be Richardson or Claiborne. And I take it that if Richardson's available, they take Richardson. That's your guess on the Browns?
That is my view.
Okay, yeah. Okay. If that's the case, and if it is also the case, what you're saying, if it is also that Wright, the receiver from Baylor, will not be available at 22 when the Browns pick their the second pick in the first round, who do you foresee the Browns taking?
I think it all depends on the draft board. The biggest mistake teams make is when they reach for need. And so just because the Browns could use another receiver doesn't mean you take that next receiver at 22. And so, but depending on how the top 20 plays out and the Browns draft board plays out, there's a good chance that a player who the Browns have a first-round grade on falls to that 22nd pick, whether that's a right tackle like Jonathan Martin, right tackle like Cordy Glenn, or you never know. They could have, right now there's 3 receivers that could go top 20, and that's Blackman, Floyd, and Wright. The Browns could have a first-round grade on maybe Stephen Hill or Ruben Randall, receiver out of LSU. So
right.
It all depends on how the board falls. In one of my recent mock drafts, I had Jonathan Martin there, the tackle from Stanford.
Right.
I have an obvious need at right tackle, so the pick makes sense. So to answer your question, it really just depends on how that top 20 falls.
How do you rate Mike Adams of Ohio State?
I'm not as high on him as most. I have on my draft board, he's right around 60, so he's a late second-round guy to me.
Wow. Why is he projected in so many first rounds then, Dane?
Some people love him, and he has the size you want. He has that wide base. He has the trunk. He has the length. He has physically what you want. But I have a lot of questions about his passion, about his work ethic, about how much he wants it, about just his, he has heavy feet, the ability to move. I don't think he's a first-round guy, but there's a good chance he goes first round because he plays the right position, and he does enough where coaches think, well, he has what you can't teach. Give him to me, and I'll coach the rest out of him. And that's a lot of NFL coaches think that way. They think if you have the bare essentials, give them to me, and I'll get the rest out of them. And I think that's the case with Mike Adams.
Final question. Who will be the biggest star in the NFL, Luck or Griffin?
In the next 2 years, it'll be Griffin. In the long term, it'll be Luck.
Why do you say that?
Griffin has that wow potential to, do similar to what Cam Newton did last year and just make play after play after play. But I tell you, Andrew Luck, he just, something about him, the game comes so natural to him. What he's been able to do in the last 3 years at Stanford, the roof is just, the potential is ridiculous for him. So if I'm thinking projecting down the road, it's Luck, but it would not surprise me if Griffin's Rookie of the Year next year.
Dane Brugler, check out his material, CBS Sports draft analyst from Warren, Ohio. Dane, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Bruce.